Are US investors focused on Warren Buffett's long-term approach? Is this why stocks aren't rallying? Meanwhile, investors are ditching Google and they're buying Nvidia. My name's Jessica. Welcome to the Daily, this 8th day of May. So stocks are charging even before we've got a trade deal in sight. And this is all despite the Fed basically hinting the US could probably head into a stagflation environment, meaning rising unemployment and rising inflation. That's not very good. That basically means interest rates will probably stay higher for longer, right? Unless tariffs are reduced. Still, investors are pretty hopeful. They're buying into the key indices and all the stocks that make up the key indices, as well as other risk-on instruments such as Bitcoin. Bitcoin has pushed higher up overnight, and we're seeing IBIT also move higher. IBIT, just as a reminder, the world's biggest ETF, Bitcoin ETF. So the Bitcoin ETF IBIT is now 27% up off its low. So Bitcoin's higher, Ether's higher, risk on mood is here. Other ETFs are also storming higher. The Nasdaq 100 ETF, the QQQ, is up 18% from its low. But wait, there's more. The leveraged QQQ ETF, what is that? Well, one that's commonly traded here at Moomoo is the TQQQ. That's Tango, Quebec, Quebec, Quebec. For those that like the phonetic alphabet, that's up 56% from the low, from its recent low. So why the heck is that? Well, broadly, the risk-on mood, as we said, is being fueled by the notion that investors remember markets have always recovered from a crash. They recovered from the last trade war in 2018, and they'll recover again. But probably they remember Warren Buffett's words this week. And that's why we're seeing investors really buy the dip, strap in for a long-term bumpy road up. Meanwhile, what about AI? Investors are rolling up their AI sleeves and getting really selective. They're basically throwing Google on the floor and buying Nvidia hard. We saw that overnight in a strong way. We're also seeing, some hopes are increasing about US-China tariffs being reduced. Yes, that'll happen. Trump said so, right? And that's why investors are being really selective here. But we're seeing investors buy back into AI stocks, particularly those that are needed in infrastructure. Obviously, the world's biggest AI infrastructure stock is Nvidia. And Trump's administration has basically hinted overnight that they're going to rescind Biden's semiconductor trade restrictions. And that's why we're seeing Nvidia continue its strong rebound up off its low. Meanwhile, investors are trashing stocks, AI stocks that are losing out and are not really pivoting as fast as we hoped in AI. Insert Google. So in case you missed it, Alphabet, which is the parent of Google, their stock stumbled about 8% overnight. That's its steepest pullback, by the way, since 2023. So what's going on? Well, there's so much to tell you. But this pullback is probably going to continue because investors are focusing right now on quality. So why the pullback? Well, a report came out overnight basically proving what we're all doing. We're all moving away from Google search, and we saw Google search drop for the first time in April. People are now using AI tools to get direct answers. And a report overnight suggested this, as well as a key executive at Apple also suggesting that younger generations are now turning to ChatGPT and Grok for bite-sized information instead of Google search. So that's not very good for Google. It's not very good for Apple either, which also makes money from search from Google. So, yeah, sure, we know people don't want to get boring lists from Google for potential answers. So that's why I'm saying you might expect a continuation of a pullback in Alphabet rather, and maybe Apple for that matter, but specifically 57% of Google Alphabet's revenue is from Google search, 57%. So that's obviously expected to slide given the damning findings that came out overnight. Very obvious. I don't know who out there is not using AI tools instead of Google. Down under, lots of different things are happening. Australian banks are proving their worth. ANZ has followed NAB and reported better than expected profits, and NAB reported better than expected profits yesterday, ANZ reporting today. And the futures are indicating a cautious open, probably upside from banks, a downside in commodities. But let's just touch on the banks for a quick sec. So we saw ANZ basically report better than expected profits and a better than expected outlook, basically underscoring the health of the Australian consumer, the Australian mortgage holder as well. And hello, we're pretty insulated from tariffs. And that's why the thinking is that institutional flows from offshore will continue to come into Australian banks. And this is why banks are particularly resilient. So do keep an eye on the big four banks. But as we've previously said, or as I've previously highlighted, ANZ is the only big four bank that's not recovered quickly from pullbacks, whereas CBA, Westpac and NAB tend to respond quicker to pullbacks. So that's something for you to consider. Commodity investors, perhaps hot under the collar. That's because oil, gas, copper, gold, silver, iron ore are all falling. Why? Well, the US dollar has risen for the first time in 4 days. The US dollar is rising on expectations that US interest rates will probably need to stay high for longer. But remember that commodity prices will probably push back up and investors will probably rotate back into commodity stocks and sectors, perhaps sooner than we think. Why? Well, two reasons. Yesterday, China cut its key interest rates. And obviously hopes are increasing of a US-China trade deal that paves the way for a continuation and a rally up of commodities. One stock that I'm watching is Sandfire. Sandfire has had a bumpy ride this year. Its stock is only up 5%, but as we can see, it plunged like the entire stock market did, but it's rallied up 27% up off its April low. It's worth watching because they make most of their money from copper and silver, both key commodities obviously needed in the electrification of cars and to build out data centers. So if we see that US-China trade deal, this stock might be upgraded and it should be on your radar. Stay safe, happy trading. We'll see you tomorrow.